Hello there, my name is Edwin Romero, and this is the Out of Office Chat, where I talk about life outside the office. And today, I want to chat about To Catch a Predator in the Badlands. A Viking we will go and 18th Street, gang gang. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I hope everyone has been well out there. Halloween is right around the corner. I hope you have your ghouly costumes or your ghastly costumes. I know on my end, I only have a costume that I've never been a big dresser upper per se. I've always wanted to. I guess I don't have. I'm just lazy, you know. But since my little one has been really getting into Halloween, we dress up every now and then. This year, I might just reuse a costume from previously. I have a dinosaur costume. You know, one of those things where you put like a fan in the back and it just, it inflates it and it looks like you're riding a dinosaur. So I'm going to do that super easy, super quick. I'm also sipping on a drink. It's not alcoholic. It's called colada morada. Best translation into English is hot purple corn drink, made out of purple corn, has a bunch of fruits, very sweet, a lot of spices. It's very, very delicious. Super popular during this time, Halloween time, within Ecuador. Now, there's good reason for that. It's a practice done as it's been done for a couple of centuries in South America and Ecuador specifically. Even prior to the Spaniards coming by, they noticed that we celebrated, Ecuadorians celebrated substantially during this time period, even taking the whole month off to do their thing. And so, it's a nice tradition that's kept on. If you haven't had colada morada, it's really good. It's really sweet, really tasty. It tastes like, let me taste it real quick. Let me let you know. It's hard to describe. It's super tangy. It's tangy for sure. I think it's a lot of the sweetness. Has brown sugar, a whole bunch of goodness. If you can pick it up, go for it. Definitely do you some good. Apart from that, I've been trying to catch up on sleep. Our youngest, his teeth have been growing in, so he wakes up during the night crabby. Not his fault. But we give him his medicine, hope he falls asleep. And then the other little one, or the bigger one, comes into bed in the middle of the night. So we get interrupted sleep. It's kind of hard, but we're doing the best we can. I hope y'all been okay. I hope y'all been doing well. Honestly, because I haven't been on Instagram, I don't know what folks are doing to prepare for Halloween. But let me know. Send me pictures. I will. Does the world still laugh out there? I hope they do. I hope folks do. Send me pics. I'd love to see my friends dress up. Any case, moving on. Let's get to the agenda. To Catch a Predator in the Badlands. Let's kick it off. So, I'm not talking about the 2000s TV show with Chris Henson, I believe his name is, where he tried to catch adult men, oh my God, creepers. Trying to catch adult men, trying to lure young kids. No, it's not that. It's not that. What I am talking about is the Predator franchise. Totally different. Totally different. I've been getting into the Predator franchise over the last couple of weeks in time for an upcoming Predator film called Predator Badlands. I'm really excited about it. So in this one here, from what I understand, and I don't like spoilers, so I try to avoid things like trailers and movie descriptions and as much as I can. I just like going in there clean, going in there just ready to be entertained, ready to be wowed. I did the same thing with one of my favorite films, Everything Everywhere All at Once. I didn't know what the heck it was about, so I went in there and I was wowed and I loved it. Still one of my top 5 favorites. I really love that film. But The Predator Badlands, I don't anticipate in a revolutionary film, but I do want to be entertained. And the reason why I'm excited about it now is because the Predator franchise has been doing really, really well. I feel they've been kind of building out their arsenal of media, films. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Prey. A couple years ago, Prey came out about a Native American woman, a young woman. She must have been in the film, maybe 17 years old or something like that. But she finds herself in a position where she's going toe-to-toe with a predator. And I know they have specific names for the predator. I think this predator was kind of an outcast. So she went at it with him. the dude massacred a whole bunch of, I think, a whole bunch of warriors from the Native American side, but also a whole bunch of folks on the French side. It was amazing, really, really well done. I didn't really think it was good. I think I held off for a minute watching that film, but I was totally floored by it. I really enjoyed it. Really cool take on the Predator. And then this year, a couple of months ago, the franchise came out with another film called Predator: Killer of Killers. Now, this one is an animated film. Really graphic. I don't watch a lot of gory stuff. I don't. But I enjoy a really good action film, and that's kind of what the Predator films do for me. Is they're really cool action films, not in the way of a John Wick or a Nobody, but really entertaining nonetheless. Prior to those two films, there've been a bunch of other stuff. Predator, Alien vs. Predator, and then the sequel, Alien vs. Predators, which I finished watching. It wasn't good. The lighting was horrible, but I liked the lore. I like the expanded universe. I had a really good time with it. And then there was Predators, which was really cool. And that film was around another rogue predator landing on Earth, being hunted by another predator, more sophisticated predator. And that was really fun to watch. So it's been really entertaining. I really enjoyed it. And I'm excited about Predator Badlands. I was telling my wife, which, by the way, she's coming with me. I'm so excited. I'm really excited to watch this film with her. And she's like, don't make me watch it. She doesn't like scary movies. But for me, it's like, I don't want to watch a scary movie. I want to be entertained by an action film that happens to have gory parts. Possibly. More than likely. I'm not going to lie. So I'm excited. I'm excited to watch that. That's what I mean by To Catch a Predator in the Badlands. Moving on to the second segment here. A Viking, we will go. Now, this one's interesting. I don't know why, but a couple of weeks ago, I decided, you know what? I want to learn more about the Vikings. I want to learn more about who they are as individuals. I picked up a couple books, really thick books. Oh my gosh, and they're hard read, y'all. They're hard reads. So I listened to some podcasts instead. It's a lot easier to digest. I'm still going through it, you know. Well, what fascinated me is about it is the people themselves. I always thought like these, they've always been considered as, I don't want to say savages, but folks that are very scary. It's written about across other cultures. Anywho, let me just jump into it. So one of the first things I learned was the phrase itself, Viking, and why the segment is called A Viking, We Will Go. So the Vikings themselves, the Vikings themselves isn't necessarily a noun, Vikings. Viking is more of a verb or a state of doing. So we're going to go Viking. We're going to go destroy or pillage, plunder and pillage. Rather, what I learned was the folks that went Viking were the Norse. So the Norse happened to be all the northern countries in Europe, including I think Sweden, Norway. I think Scandinavia is made up of a couple of these countries, and those themselves, they retained their own culture. And part of it was during the Viking Age. They would go ahead and pillage. I learned something really cool. The Viking Age didn't last. It wasn't a part of the entire Norse history. The Norse were way more than just Viking. They were just more than pillaging. But the reason to go pillage, the reason to go a Viking was because of a lack of resources, from what I understand. I might be wrong. I mean, I'm doing this podcast, y'all. I am not a scholar by any means, but from what I understand, is that during this time there's a lot of duress, and it coincided with a couple of unfortunate natural disasters. There were two supervolcanoes that occurred, I want to say during the 6th century AD, which had ramifications or which impacted societies centuries after. So a dim light, which resulted in food scarcity, which made things a lot more competitive. It didn't sound like a really fun time to be around, right? So the Norse people were impacted by that to a degree. I imagine a lot. So, Vikings, to go Viking meant that, they went to go find resources to bring back to homeland. And that included, finding foods, taking folks as slaves and bringing them back. But the Norse themselves, I'm not like an expert in Norse culture, but it sounds like it was pretty darn rich. They had their own society, included like family status or wealth status, communities. I think it went as far as having their own kind of, I don't want to say judge and jury type of system, but places or a scenario where you have an issue with a family, you come in, bring it to the town square or the township, and then they try to figure it out for everybody, right? So now they hadn't discovered writing, which is another thing that I thought was pretty fascinating. They hadn't discovered writing, so there isn't necessarily any paperwork detailing their history. Most of the history comes from a lot of the locations that they pillaged, but they had their own, I guess, way of writing, and that included like through these runes, and these runes were later found probably around I think 11 or 1200 AD. So there's some written documentation, not necessarily from the Norse people themselves, but the surrounding areas that suffered from their pillaging. Now, I thought that was really cool. And the other thing, and I'm still working on it, I'm really curious to see how this plays out. One of the things that fascinates me is the creation stories. So creation stories across different cultures. And the Norse folks, I want to understand, I wanted to understand their creation story. Now, I have a book, I'm looking at it right now. It's heavy. It's got to be like 300-400 pages long. But their creation story is pretty interesting. It centers around heavily on nature, specifically a tree. I'm not sure what the tree is called, but the tree itself houses the 9 realms all across its tree, and it's a massive tree. The tree gives out life and sustenance to all beings and whatnot. And 2 of those realms happen to be Midgard, which is Earth, and Asgard. Funnily enough, Marvel calls out Asgard. The leader of Asgard is Odin, and then his sons. I believe Loki is his son, and Thor, of course, which we're all familiar with. I believe Chris Hemsworth has brought Thor to the limelight. Maybe, I don't know. And of course, his wife. I forget his wife's name. But anywho, those folks are in charge of Asgard, and there's some sort of relationship that exists really strong between Asgard and Midgard, and that's the stuff that always fascinates me, y'all. If I'm being honest, is that we talk about Earth, right? Earth, and then the different planes of existence, and even in Norse mythology, they talk about the different realms that exists alongside, above, and below Earth or Midgard, Asgard as well, and there's an interesting relationship that exists across all of them. And I myself, I'm always very curious about kind of these parallel realities, spiritual parallel realities that might exist, things that might influence human activity, human behaviors. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to go into learning about the Vikings and the Norse. I still haven't tapped into the Norse mythology book. I'll see how far I get into it. When I get into it, I have kind of a queue of books. But yeah, that's what's been eating up my time in the evenings, reading about Vikings and whatnot. The last segment, y'all, and it's a big one. 18th Street, gang. Now, I'm going to take a breather, y'all. I'm going to take a breather and take a sip of my colada morada. Be patient with me. Give me 1 second. Good stuff. All right, y'all. So, I think it's always very interesting when we talk about gangs and street gangs. I don't know what it is. I think it might be something with either male youths or male city youths. We always, at least on my part, I recall a time where I always wanted to learn about gang activity without necessarily being in a gang. So that meant like, who are the gangs that surround my neighborhood? What other gangs exist out there? What are popular gangs? And one of a couple of the most popular, one of the most prolific gangs that started to arise in the early 2000s was MS-13. So, like any other youth, you have access to the internet, you have access to YouTube, you begin to do research, who these gangs are, how they function. So I learned about MS-13. And then in addition to that, I was scrolling in YouTube. It was just years ago, y'all. Years ago, I was scrolling through YouTube, learning, watching these videos on gangs and whatnot. And one of the gangs that popped out was 18th Street. Now, 18th Street, if you're not familiar with this gang, it is a gang started by Salvadorians, similar to MS-13. So let me back up a little bit because there's a lot of history. I'm not going to go through all the history, but this is going somewhere, so bear with me. So, in El Salvador, I'm not sure how familiar you all are with the history of El Salvador, but there was a pretty nasty civil war that existed, I believe, the 80s and 90s, which resulted in, I would say, a mass exodus from the country into the United States. And in the United States, we have the Salvadorians, they're new to the country, and they are basically targeted by other gangs, so they form their own gang. So you have MS-13, and then you have a branch, a splinter off of a group of other Salvadorians that form off 18th Street. So 18th Street, then what ended up happening was deportations in the, I think, 90s and 2000s. I think 90s, because I think it was I think 90s. So you have a mass deportation. So a lot of these folks went back to their country, and these countries already I would imagine it's pretty weakened from the Civil War, also more than likely have, weapons lying around more freely. And now they're hardened gang members who go back to these countries. And then the countries themselves have a gang problem. All this is to say is when I was younger, about 10, 15 years ago, I found a documentary called 18 with a Bullet. It is still to this day one of my favorite documentaries. I rediscovered it again a couple of weeks ago, and I've been kind of going through the episodes. It's not a lot. It's actually a 3-episode documentary series, really short, but it is one of my favorite documentaries because it's so raw and it's so intense, but also so captivating. It's hard to describe. I'll link it to the in the show notes. But the 3 parts center around different aspects of the gang. The first episode is around kids in the gang. And it's wild because a lot of these kids they're kids. They're very enthusiastic. They are, goofy. They joke around with one another, but they're also part of a gang. So they perform gang activities. So 18th Street gang activities, anywhere from ranging from jumping folks in to retaliating to recuperating from an attack to drugs. It's pretty wild, but it's interesting to see. Now you can probably hear right now. There's some sort of ambulance or fire truck coming by. I do apologize if you do hear that. All right, it's gone. So these individuals, these kids, it's a pretty raw documentary, right? And it's also really wild to see. It's really well done. The documentary crew did a really good job at just sitting down, talking to these kids. That's the first part of it, right? It's how they function on the streets. Then the second episode goes into an OG 18th Street member called Slappy. Now, Slappy is he was one of the original members that came from Los Angeles, got deported, went back to El Salvador, and started recruiting and forming gangs in El Salvador. So what's wild about him, again, very charismatic, very enthusiastic. He looks as if he's just a nice guy, nice guy to be around. But throughout the entire episode, you start to see, he can be that, but also a hardcore killer. This episode, I think, is called A Killer's Tale. So he is actually in hiding from the police because of a murder he had committed only a few days, if not weeks, prior to the filming of the documentary. And that's what makes it so raw, y'all. It's not as if everyone was like, all right, stop what you're doing, come on, be on your best behavior. We have a documentary crew coming by. No, they were like, all right, so we're going to do what we're going to do as 18th Street, as a gang, and then you record it. It's pretty wild. So even during this film, like he is, even during the filming, he not only is in hiding, but he's a family he wants to take care of. So he's kind of torn, like, between both lifestyles, being a gang member and being a family man. And it's weird because he can't even go back to his family because where they live, they're looking for him, the authorities, because of the murder. Now, on top of that, he forms a drug habit that they monitor and they capture throughout the filming. It's pretty wild. And at the end, unfortunately, it kind of ends with him. I don't want to spoil it, but I will. It ends with him being arrested for a murder he had just committed, literally a day after he said he was going to turn his life around. So really sad, really wild. So he ends up going to jail. And there, in this episode it's really neat because they make reference to the star of the third episode, an individual named Duke. Duke, like Slappy, is an OG member, a highly respected 18th Street gang member. Now, this is my theory. I can't really confirm it. This is my theory, is that Duke was going to have a pretty heavy episode. Well, the way it starts out, he's on the street, he's with his wife, he's with his kids, just being kind of like a father, right? A father and a husband. And then moments into the episode, he's arrested because of, I guess, for holding an AK, and he's sent off to jail. Now, why this episode so amazing was the camera crew, the documentary crew pivots insanely, beautifully. So my guess is that they weren't anticipating going to jail, and they did. They went to a Salvadorian 18th Street prison to follow and film Duke. And as you follow Duke into prison, you're also greeted to these other members, including Diablo and I think maybe somebody else. I forget which, who. But it's pretty wild because, again, you see all these folks and they seem pretty, once you talk to them, apart from the gang stuff, they seem pretty charismatic. So you see kind of the activities they get up to inside the prison, how they conduct themselves, what kind of takes priority across all these folks, the kids, Slappy, Duke. It's pretty wild stuff, and it's in a way, it's kind of unfiltered. Like I said, they knew the camera crew was coming, but they weren't adjusting their lifestyles accordingly. They just filmed what was happening. Now, what happens to Duke? Well, Duke himself, I'll be honest, I'm in the middle of that episode. I watched it years ago. I'm rewatching it now. If I remember correctly, Duke stays in jail. No, he's still in jail, and this is what's wild, y'all. So after this aired, I began to look up what other folks, like if there's any update on folks. And I found out there is like an active, I don't want to say community, but an active group of individuals that regularly monitor the updates on these folks. So, for example, the kids in the gang, what I learned was one of the main kids, the gang leader in the group is Charlie. I think he's 15, 16 years old. Charlie leads a gang in his neighborhood. So Charlie, where he stands now, I believe he made some sort of deal with the president. The current president, I forget his name, but apparently the current president is really big on sending gang members to jail. Like, he's really harsh on that law. So there are theories that Charlie made a deal with him and was able to escape being prosecuted. Other folks, like, unfortunately, there's this one kid called Travieso. Now, Travieso, again, very charismatic, very, you can tell, like, he's a kid. At one point, he's on a call with his mom, telling her how much he misses her and how much he wants to be with her. And then later that episode, he's in hiding because he committed a murder. There are, based on the comments in some of these videos, there are theories that he ended up in jail. And I say that because you see like this video that was released like a year or so ago, and you see an individual that looks just like Travieso, all tatted up. Really sad. Slappy, I heard Slappy ended up dying in jail through, there's a prison riot between, wildly enough, two conflicting factions of 18th Street, and he ended up being a victim during a riot. Duke, as I mentioned, he's still in jail. There was a video that came out a couple years ago where Duke was being interviewed and filmed. So it's pretty wild stuff. I think it's a really phenomenal documentary. Really sad, but really raw, really well done, well put together. If you're into that sort of stuff, again, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I really enjoyed it, and not just because like, I mean, there was swearing, of course, but the violence, there was no violence. It was, I mean, there were folks getting jumped in, so I guess there's a little bit of violence, but that aside, it's definitely worth a watch. And it's free on YouTube. I'll go ahead and link it in the show notes. Well, y'all, that is all I got. I really appreciate the time. Thank you for joining me, and hopefully I'll be in touch with y'all soon. Enjoy the Halloween festivities. If you have pictures, send my way. I'm not active on Instagram or Facebook, but on Snapchat, you can add me at Edwin Dan Romero. Thanks again. I appreciate it, and we'll talk soon. Take care, y'all.